don't think we need to get hung up necessarily in this dichotomy of like, oh, how do I live purely in the gift, or like, how do I reject what we're doing right now? I think that there's a balance and there's a common ground, and it's about who is your community? What are your gifts? What do you need to live? How do you cultivate as many relationships with people and the things that you use and consume so that you can minimize some of the highly calculated, and the highly calculated in our society oftentimes revolve around the extractive profit element. So how do we remove ourselves from some of that so that we're not having our energy being taken away and put in someone else's pocket?
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and the flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Oh, mommy, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm joined by the Tea Time Traveler, aka He Who Sips a Lot, aka Mr. Tinkerman, aka Tea Steepy, G Steepy, G Sips, aka my good friend Guisepi Spadafora. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mason.
Of course, yeah. I was very much looking forward to this conversation, and this is the day after a big day for you.
Yeah, I got married last night. That was a party.
That was fun?
Yeah. It was really good.
Any favorite moments?
I actually can't say them on camera.
Very good.
We had a variety show, which was amazing. We asked our guests to perform, and we had juggling and dancing and poetry and speeches, and I was just blown away by all the creativity that we had.
The juggling was amazing. That guy was super talented. I also wanted to, I wasn't going to bring this up, but the fact that it was in between a sunny day, the wedding was a sunny day, but it was sandwiched in between rain and thunder and lightning and all that. Pretty epic.
It was amazing. Yeah. I mean, we had smoke in the sky for days leading up to the wedding, and then we had a crazy thunderstorm, which these do not happen here on San Juan Island, very rarely, and that led into a bunch of rain, and then it literally, the rain parted for the wedding day and started raining last night again.
Yep, so. Beautiful. Well, can you tell us a little bit about the land that we're on here? Talking Horse Ranch?
We're on Talking Horse Ranch. Yeah. This is a 120-acre ranch on San Juan Island. My now wife, Ally, and I are kind of land steward caretakers here, alongside a farmer who raises pastured meats. And we're kind of on a journey here to help kind of bring life back into this place. It's been a little neglected for the last 20 years or so, and our goal is to kind of bring it back alive. And part of that is to bring community in and people and energy, and that was what our wedding was about last night. We built a stage here, which hopefully can stay here.
Very cool.
And this property has gone through many hands and many iterations. It was built by a follower of the spiritual leader Ramtha.
Oh.
And so there's pyramids on all the buildings, and they believe that we're entering a post-petroleum world where horses are going to be the main form of transportation. So there was a lot of horse infrastructure built here. Then this was a golf course, a 9-hole golf course for several years in the 90s, and a bunch of things in between. But all the hands that have gone into shaping this land, there's been a lot of really cool plants that have been planted, trees, and there's some remnants of historic orchards here, and most of it's wild. There's a handful of buildings all kind of in the area that we are here, but there's about 80 acres over here that has no structures. It's a really special place. We have our own, we call it a mountain, but Beaver Hill.
I went up there.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of different ecosystems. There's a lot of a variety of native ecosystems as well, intermixed with human planted stuff, which is it's beautiful and fun. Where we're sitting in the pond actually was one of my favorite areas. Someone planted pennyroyal here, and it obviously likes a very particular microclimate of moisture. And so all along the edge of the pond, all the way around, there are purple flowers in a perfect circle around this pond. And it's maybe about 8 feet 10 feet back from the water's edge, and not quite up in the drier fields. It's just that perfect moisture zone where it just grows in a beautiful circle.
You're giving the people what they want. You're talking about plants.
Figure you gotta throw some of that stuff in.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm quite fond of pennyroyal. I love the way it smells.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, do you think it's worth telling the story about why it's called Talking Horse?
Sure.
Yeah, because I heard there's an interesting story behind that.
Yeah, so Ramtha is a 35,000-year-old Lemurian warrior channeled by a woman named J.Z. Knight, who has a school out down in Yelm, Washington. And Ernie Kanzler, who built most of this property, he was an heir of the Ford Motor Company, a finance executive in the Ford Motor Company. So he had a bunch of money. And J.Z. Knight, who also happens to be a horse breeder, conveniently, convinced him to buy this horse from her, who was that was a talking horse, that he could communicate with. And this horse is a special horse. Mm-hmm. I've heard 3 stories. One is that the horse was the reincarnation of the horse that Ramtha rode into battle against Atlantis. Another story, plausible.
Yep.
Another story is that the horse was a past life lover of Ernie's. I'm assuming in human form.
Sure.
Maybe not. And also that the horse was the reincarnation of Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
Probably all true.
Yeah.
And so J.Z. Knight convinced Ernie to pay $1 million for this talking horse. And there's a barn over here with a pyramid on top that was built specifically for the talking horse. And so that story has kind of lived on through the different people who have owned this property, and the current owners and their sons, I think, came up with the name for this property about 20 years ago, Talking Horse Ranch, to honor the talking horse.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
It's got 3 stories. All right, so you're a married man now, living out here, but before all this, you traveled the nation for, I always say over a decade, but
Yeah.
it was more like 15 years perhaps,
Yeah.
serving free tea to communities all over. And I'm just kind of curious if you could tell the Herb Alley audience the origins of the free tea bus.
Yeah.
Edna Lu.
Yeah. So I read a statistic. It's something like 40% of Americans experience chronic loneliness. And I was one of those people. We all know we interact in a world and society where oftentimes it can be difficult to make genuine connections and relationships. And my personal story is that I was living in my pickup truck in Los Angeles. I was about 21, 22, working full-time as a video editor, sitting in front of a computer screen, and most of my human, I don't even want to say interaction, but human interaction was on a computer screen. Others, editing, I was editing a documentary. And so that was where I got most of my these are people, and it's not a two-way street, it's just watching people on a screen. And when I would go out into Los Angeles and, in daily life, all my interactions revolved around profit maximization. I would go into a store, I would try to get as much food as I can for my dollars, and they would try to get as much dollars as they could for the food. Or I go into a bar and, because that's what you do when you're 21, 22, meet people. And on multiple occasions I had, women come up to me and say, "Hey, you want to buy me a drink?" Like, okay, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. Buy him a drink and walk away. So, wow, that feels weird.
Yeah.
And so after a couple months of being there in Hollywood, and I was working 50 or 60, sometimes 70 hours a week, I started going down to Hollywood Boulevard. We finished the rough cut of the documentary. I all of a sudden had a little bit more time on my hands, and so I would go down to Hollywood Boulevard after work, which is just an eclectic mix of people from all over the world, the entire social strata, from homeless people to movie stars, and I just would open the tailgate of my pickup truck, pull out the camp stove, cook my dinner, and inevitably passersby would say, "What is this? Why are you here?" I'm like, "Well, this is my kitchen, and I'm here because I'm cooking dinner in my kitchen, and welcome to my living room." I had a little rug and a couple of camp chairs, and I'd basically invite people to sit with me and eat with me, and a lot of people were just, well, some people were actually hungry for food, but a lot of people were just hungry for conversation and interaction. And a lot of people come to Hollywood Boulevard with their eyes open, ready to experience, you know, especially people who traveled from other places. And so after dinner, to keep those interactions going, I would just put the kettle on and make tea. And I would just, for hours, be making more hot water and steeping more tea. And it just became kind of this magical experience where I was sitting with people of all kinds, you know, gangster, street names tattooed on his face, sitting with like a tourist couple from Japan, family from Ohio, sitting with like a gutter punk street kid, all sitting on the same level, sharing the same warm beverage. There was no catch, there was no obligation, there was no, it was really just setting the stage for genuine human interaction. There's no one trying to get anything from anyone. And was kind of the impetus for me to eventually buy a short school bus named Edna and build her out into a mobile-free tea house. And so that chapter in the tea bus was 11 years. After a couple of years of serving tea around the country in my pickup truck, and it was a magical experience. Had somewhere around probably about 25,000 people come through the doors of the tea bus over that decade. I got about 40 miles per gallon, meaning for every 40 miles I drove, I served a gallon of tea. It's pretty good fuel economy for a school bus.
Totally.
Yeah.
You served 36,970 cups of tea, and how many of those were from you? Or how many
did I drink? Don't tell anyone, probably about half.
Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. Any stories you'd like to share from the road?
Sure.
Yeah.
There are a lot of stories from the road. First of all, the road is magic. There are still remnants in our society of a long-time human tradition, which is the guest-host relationship, where someone who is traveling meets someone who is stationary, and the person who is stationary hosts them and gives to them. And my journey was a little different in the sense that I was actually hosting people a lot in my home on the road, but there's magic that happens in that guest-host relationship because it's an unspoken agreement in our culture that you help someone who's traveling. It's not about anything that's self-serving for the host. It's truly about. I mean, obviously the host gets something out of it. They get stories and they get to meet someone new and build a relationship. But it's not. It's very different than a lot of the modern relationships that are more calculated and transactional. So because of that, obviously a lot of really beautiful stories happen. One of the things I wanted to bring up as a story is, a lot of people over the years were always trying to give me money for tea. Like we have this instinctual cultural thing. It's like, well, I have to reciprocate immediately in a highly calculated way in order for this transaction to feel over. And historically, with no unit of accounting, which is what we use money for, as a unit of accounting, and there's no way to say that this object equals this many of this object, it's all just very rough and loose. Historically, relationships always had to be open-ended when, especially in community where you can't calculate everything out because there's no unit of accounting. And so for me, I always turned down money because I really wanted to cultivate a sense of what it's like to have an interaction that doesn't revolve around high calculation. So one of the things I did was kind of redirect. Okay, how do I take that because I do believe in reciprocity, and I think it's beautiful and wonderful when people offer. And I don't want to say, nope, sorry, I'm too good for your reciprocity. But how can I transform this into a more meaningful interaction? And so for me, that was creating what was first a jar and then became a set of drawers called the gift and take. And the gift and take, anyone can put in and anyone can take out. So when people would offer money, I'd say, here's the gift and take. And I would take out to buy honey or pay parking meters where if I was serving tea somewhere or things like that were part of the experience and journey. And, a lot of people put in, a lot of people took out. And I just remember, serving tea at Occupy Oakland and people being like, you can't leave that jar out. It is going to get stolen in Oakland. And I'm like, well, they can't steal it.
Right.
You can't steal something that's being given away. And of course the jar started almost empty. And by the end of the day, it was overflowing. It's like, and there's this like idea, oh, Oakland is so dangerous and everyone, people steal stuff all the time. And yeah, I'm sure that's true. But there's something about the experience of the gift and take that instills a level of responsibility into people. And part of that is giving trust. And part of that is a community accountability because there's lots of sets of eyes around. So there was one time in the course of a decade that the gift and take was completely emptied. At least of the cash, all the coins were still there. And that was a guy in North Carolina who was in desperate need. He had been locked out of his apartment because he wasn't able to make rent. He was in desperate need. And he emptied it out in the eyes of everyone who was sitting there, hanging out and drinking tea, and I felt really grateful for that. It'd be nice to be like, oh, and the gift and take was never emptied, but that's not the point. Yeah. The point is that it's there for people in need. If people have access, they can put in. If people are in need, they can take out. And to me, that showed me something about human nature, that even though we're taught that self-interest is the primary function or the primary motivator of humans, which is what our economic model is based upon, that it's a lot more nuanced than that. And that, when our basic needs are not being met, we definitely act more out of self-interest. And that guy's a perfect example. He had lost his shelter. So for me, that was like one of the greatest lessons. And maybe that's not like just one individual story, but it's a conglomeration of the tens of thousands of people who had the opportunity to take money or give money, and it was never empty. I mean, it was basically always overflowing to the point where I kind of would just so physically all the money would fit in the drawer, I would kind of take some out to put, and I had like a back stock of cash, and I would kind of reinfuse it back in. So there was a little bit of buffer there. And that's part of the magic of the road, is to learn these new things that maybe our culture doesn't necessarily do the best job at explaining to us. But the experience and interacting with lots of different human beings gives us a greater understanding of some of the nuances of what it means to be human.
Beautiful. Yeah, if I recall correctly, the gift and take wasn't just, say, cash or change. There was also... I don't know what else was in there. There was
a few drawers. The biggest ones was just like small gifts. Things people maybe had on them when they randomly stumbled upon the free tea bus. Because almost everyone who came aboard the free tea bus, it was random. They'd never heard of it. They'd never seen it. It was just happened to be parked in their neighborhood, or at their favorite surf spot, or on the trail they were hiking. And so, people would put little, whatever they had on them. It might be a piece of jewelry or a postcard or a sticker or something. And then there was a drawer that was specifically for herbs, salves, teas, tinctures, that because I ended up at so many herbalism events and gatherings, and lots of herbalists were drawn to the space. And so a lot of those kinds of things ended up in the bus. And then my favorite one was it was a drawer of what I call share cards, which are little business cards that are printed. They say share card. The person writes a gift that they're willing to share with a stranger, what it is, what their contact information, best way to get a hold of them. And then, again, anyone could put in, anyone could take out. It's not a one-for-one. You don't have to put one in and take one out. And so it might be, there was I remember a little boy in Texas who wrote one McDonald's toy. He wanted to give away a McDonald's toy and left his contact information. And then someone else wrote a scarf knit with the colors of your choice.
Wow.
Or, and so it was a lot of beautiful things that a person on one side of the country might have written and put in there, and someone on the other side of the country might have taken out. And it blows my mind to know actually how many gifts were given indirectly through the free tea bus.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I love that. So that actually is a nice segue into a guest question that we have from a nice fella I met up at the wedding, Noel. It's great to get to know Noel. Hey, Noel, if you're watching. So here is your guest question.
So Giuseppe showed me through his actions and his passion that we can live in a gift economy, and not just a little bit, but actually quite a lot. And so he inspired me to bring more gift economy into my life. But I found that it's quite a challenge, because I feel like I have one foot in this world that really requires us to have money, have a job, an income, and bills to pay. And then in the other world, there's our ideals, where we live by our heart and live by love. And so my question to Giuseppe is, what advice do you have for us that live in both worlds? How can we bring more of that gift economy into our life, and how can we live more by our ideals? And thank you for inspiring me, Giuseppe.
Wow, that's incredibly sweet. That's a really good question. Obviously, we live in the world we live in. It's really difficult to live purely in the gift. But we don't have to. And I say that because as far as, what the reading and research that I have done, and what I believe is, our human past, is that most human societies for most of human history lived in the realm of relationships, whether it's relationship with the physical things that we need to survive, or relationships with one another, which are built through the gift. I argue that the gift is the primary way that humans create and maintain and deepen bonds with one another. And that was the primary economy for most of human history, but that we have always, with outside groups, people who are not our immediate friends, family, and neighbors, had some level of calculated exchange, because calculated exchange creates boundaries, and non-calculated exchange creates bonds. And so despite what the free tea bus, which was complete radical gifting with every person who walked past the bus, that's not a sustainable model for the individual. And for society. I think radical gifting is awesome, and we should have more and plenty of it. But I do think that a lot of, we can learn a lot from our human history, which is that, when two, within a community or tribe, people practiced sharing. When meeting with another community or tribe, that's when barter happens. That's when one-for-one interactions happen. That creates a boundary, because when you have a calculated exchange, I give you this, you give me that, the relationship's over. And that there's no open end. And that creates a sense of safety because there's no expectations. Versus non-calculated sharing, you want it open-ended, because never being able to repay your debts because it's not calculated and there's no way to ever do that, and you're always maybe giving a little bit more than you should because you love these people and whatever, that creates bonds, the open-endedness of the interaction. And so in our daily world, we can still practice the gift with the ones we love. And that was one of my big lessons getting off the road, was how do I transition from radical gifting to anyone and everyone to radical gifting with the people that I'm closest with, my friends and my family. And that's what this wedding was about, was how do we bring in all of these people that we've built amazing relationships bring them in to accomplish a big task, and have that gifting occur. But going back to Noel's questions, like, we oftentimes have to have the calculated exchange with those people that are outside of us. The Jewish people have a double law in regards to usury. Usury we think of as exorbitant interest on a loan. For most major religions have at some point considered usury, which is any interest on a loan, and really it's this idea that you're trying to it's the extension of calculated exchange, that like is a sin or bad or whatever. And in the Jewish tradition, there's a double law of usury, which is thou shalt not commit usury upon thy brother. Basically, within your community, having highly calculated exchange is frowned upon. Lending at interest, doing things like that. But with a stranger, it's okay. And what that does is it says within the community, you're building bonds, right? You're not taking advantage of one another. You're having open-ended, non-calculated exchange. But around the perimeter with outsiders, you're having calculated exchange because you need to protect yourselves, and that's creating the boundary around your community. And so what I like to think about is that there's kind of like a gradient of exchange. Non-calculated is on this end, and profit maximization and capitalism are on this end. And there's a whole gradient in between. And with our friends and family and neighbors, being closer to this end is really helpful. And there are ways to do it that still operate in our economy. You might work for a friend for money, but as long as you make sure to maintain to have non-calculated elements, inviting them over for dinner or giving them a little bit extra than you promised, or whatever it is, like maintaining some elements of the gift can help us function in a highly calculated capitalist world that's over here. And having a calculated exchange like barter or just giving cash for something is in and of itself not bad. It's neutral. It's kind of like the middle ground. Profit, which is getting more out than you put in, that's the definition of profit. That's when you start having, getting paid for your time is not necessarily bad, but, or buying something in the store. But when you start having someone taking more out than they put in, that's when basically that's an extractive process. And so relationships don't get built. Your community doesn't get stronger. Pockets might get fatter. And so existing somewhere in this realm of this neutral ground over to the non-calculated exchange is kind of the sweet spot. And I came up with a list, I probably can't recite it all right now, of maybe 7 different ways that we can operate in a highly calculated world that is less calculated, more fulfilling, helps create relationships. And that could be work trade, barter, sliding scale, pay it forward, partial pay it forward, I've seen people do. Time banking, there's a bunch of these ways that we can kind of remove ourselves from the boundaries that are created by transactional relationships and move them closer to something a little bit more traditional and more bond creating. And so I don't think we need to get hung up necessarily in this dichotomy of like, oh, how do I live purely in the gift, or like, how do I reject what we're doing right now? I think that there's a balance and there's a common ground, and it's about who is your community? What are your gifts? What do you need to live? How do you cultivate as many relationships with people and the things that you use and consume so that you can minimize some of the highly calculated and the highly calculated in our society oftentimes revolve around the extractive profit element. So how do we remove ourselves from some of that so that we're not having our energy being taken away and put in someone else's pocket? So for people like Noel, myself, I'm in this journey. How do I do this?
Yeah.
How do I live? Because my life was so purely, not purely, but 90% of my interactions were the gift, or dumpster diving, or, having a relationship with the things I was using or consuming. And now that I'm stationary, I'm having to rebuild that because it's like a process. So I don't know if that answered Noel's question.
I think it does, and the moment you brought in the spectrum is really when it made it clear for me.
Yeah.
That really helps me kind of visualize, like, you got your close community and your family on one side, and then you have everybody else over here, I guess, and trying to incorporate more of that gift economy closer to that into the spectrum makes perfect sense to me. And maybe every year that goes by, maybe you try to practice a little bit more. So I think that definitely answered Noel's question. Have you ever heard the term lanyap before?
No.
So in New Orleans, there's this thing called lanyap, and basically that means giving a little extra. And I always really loved that. So if you go to a restaurant, you purchase a meal, they'll give you a little bit extra. They call that lanyap. As you were talking, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's what they're doing. They're trying to build a closer bond with the community, and maybe that's one of the reasons people adore that city so much, because of the little bit extra that they give people. And
that was in our wedding vows last night. It was, I vow to always give a little bit of extra. Yeah. A little bit more than I vow to give a little bit more than I think I should.
But if you're both giving more, how are you going to calculate, like, who gives?
We're keeping tallies. Okay. Yeah. We've got a secret tally mark. Yeah.
Well, you brought up dumpster diving, which you taught me how to dumpster dive, and I'm yet to do it in our new home of Wisconsin, so I need to get on it. But I was hoping you could kind of share the philosophy behind dumpster diving, and was that how you ate on the road? What percentage or whatnot? Maybe that's more boring, but let's talk about the philosophy of dumpster diving.
Well, dumpster diving is basically, it's fun because you get to sneak around and steal things from dumpsters. There's something like there's something fun about doing something that's
feels naughty.
Yeah, it feels naughty. And while it is technically stealing, because you're stealing from the waste management company, they get paid to haul trash, and so they can't, they are losing money.
That's very bizarre to think of it that way.
By you pulling stuff out of the trash. There's probably a half a dozen ways in which dumpster diving, I guess, fits in my personal moral framework. You're removing waste from the landfill, and that is, there's so many ways. When food goes into the landfill, it biodegrades in an anaerobic environment, which releases methane, which is 30 times more potent of a greenhouse gas than CO2. So anaerobic decomposition, anytime any organic matter goes in the landfill, and something like over 50% of what goes in the landfill is biodegradable. So we're creating massive quantities of methane, which of course can be harvested, but it isn't always, or probably mostly it's not. All the embedded energy that went into that food, from growing to shipping to storing, just go in the trash. It's negating some of that. it's reducing the demand on the economy because I'm not spending the dollar for the food. It's reducing the demand on the economy to produce more food. It's kind of giving a middle finger to the food industry, and basically the capitalist economy, which capitalist economy forces businesses to grow at 2 to 3% a year minimum, because of inflation and inefficiencies and et cetera. But growth at all costs in a country that the population only grows at 1% a year, like the United States, but food industry has to grow at 2 or 3% a year. How do they make up for that extra food they need to sell every year? And one of the other, they make food that has no nutrient value, so you have to eat more. Yeah. They make food that's addictive. These are all done in a lab. Yeah. Make food that is addictive, has no nutrient value, making extremely stringent sell-by dates, making it so unacceptable to buy a fruit or a vegetable that's imperfect, or a dented can, or all of these things that we do. And so it's kind of giving a middle finger to all that and saying, actually, we can use our senses, our sight, our smell, our taste, our intellect to determine, why is this in the dumpster? Oh, it's got a bruise. Well, that's fine. I can eat that. Oh, it expired yesterday, and that's fine. I can eat that. And then it's like personal freedom. I don't have to go to a job to make pieces of paper to then buy food. It's, it's political, it's economic, it's social, it's all of these things. And so on the road, you probably, and Ally was with me on and off for the last 6 years being on the road. But about 50 to 90% of our food came through non-monetary interactions. Wow. So that was dumpster diving, wild harvesting, growing sprouts, brewing kombucha, making krauts, being gifted all kinds of food. I did like a 3-month journey through the Deep South. And I spent, I think, a total of $50 on food in 3 months.
Wow.
Because people were inviting me to their houses. Yeah. Southern hospitality is real.
Yeah.
Inviting me to their houses, giving me homemade wines and home canned foods. And I was helping, with processing a deer and getting some of that. And just amazing dumpsters. There's some great dumpsters out there. Oh, I don't want to say them out. I don't want to transmit them, but there's some great dumpsters out there. So I don't know. It's just, I love reducing waste. For me, probably about 10 years ago, I got to the point in my life where I was taking more out of the trash than I was putting in.
That's amazing.
And that felt really good.
Yeah.
Now that I'm stationary, my primary business is to, as an alternative to smashing buildings and putting them in the landfill, I deconstruct by hand buildings to salvage the materials. So at this point, I keep or take about 20 times as much as I put in.
Wow.
To the trash. So having there's that carbon neutral kind of idea. I'm like a trash negative person, I guess.
Yeah, we should all aspire to be more like that. And so that actually segues nicely into kind of a new project, at least it appears to me to be a project of yours, called Mr. Tinkerman. And as I said in the intro, you are the Mr. Tinkerman. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. In making a stationary home and trying to figure out, well, how do I fit into a community? How do I participate in the gift in one place? It's, tea is simple and easy. It's really easy to just make a bunch of tea and give it away. That's it's so simple. How do I continue the tradition of the gift, but in one location with a specific community in order to foster relationships, to build up, because I didn't necessarily always receive the benefit of gifting by being on the road, because I gave radically to anyone and everyone, and 90%, 95% of people I'd never see again. And I indirectly receive it because I know it's very circular and, it permeates, I know other people are gifting to other people, which, just elevates the amount of gifting happening in the world. But, historically, gifting was all about your community. Who's your community? And so for me, we started doing we have a once a month Steep Easy, we call it, which is like an underground word of mouth free tea house here at Talking Horse Ranch.
Cool.
And but my real passion and where I felt like I can do like more real work to help my community is that I love fixing and building things. I like salvaging things. I have a very large collection of nuts and bolts and screws and hardware, and it just keeps growing, and it's awesome, and so much salvage material, and I love seeing things not going to landfill and things getting fixed. And so I don't know exactly, I'm not making any promises right now because this is being recorded. My goal is to be open 1 day a week. Here I'm building a shop on the farm to have a free repair service. Anyone can bring anything. I'm not doing combustion engines, but tools, furniture, small appliances, I don't know what, things that people have that are falling apart, need another life or new home. And if they want to participate, they can participate and make it a thing. And, there's already other people who have been talking about joining me and helping out. And so I think,
Cool.
hoping it's turning into just like a little thing on Fridays. People are going to come and hang out and fix things and do projects, and it's just my way of giving to the community. And because just our wedding is a great example of this.
Yep.
We have spent so much time traveling and giving. Like that time we came and cleaned your house.
Yes, I was going to bring that up.
And our chef who cooked our salmon, Ally and I spent a month last summer in Montana renovating their bathroom.
Wow.
His family's bathroom. And so when we asked if he could cook up the salmon last night, no problem.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not calculated.
Right.
We didn't know when we
Right.
did that was what was going to happen. He didn't know.
Yeah.
But when we go above and beyond, give a little bit more than we think we should. What's the
Lanyap.
Lanyap?
It's like Lagniappe. Lanyap.
Wow.
I think it's French.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have to find the literal translation to that.
Totally.
But yeah, it creates magic. Yeah. And that's what it's about for me, is how do I take the magic of the road and infuse it into my local community, and not just be this boring thing that I think things can become mundane in a stationary, repetitive lifestyle. So how do we keep it alive and keep the magic alive and cultivate community? And it's cool. And it's kind of started to take form. We actually, in about 3 weeks, we've got our second repair fair. So there's different organizations and groups here. A couple of them I'm involved with. We have a local community shop. We have a local community arts organization, and a bunch of individuals. And we take over the Grange Hall and we set up a completely free repair day. And this is the second one this year, and I think we'll probably continue to do 2 a year. But it's basically similar vibe, same thing, but on a larger scale. There's people darning. There's people with sewing machines. There's people repairing lamps. I'm there mostly doing tools, repairing tools. So Mr. Tinkerman is just maybe the evolution of what I kind of feel called to do. Tea was a convenient, wonderful, beautiful, easy thing to do for the masses. And now as I cultivate deeper, hone my skills in the areas that interest me, where I have the best chance of being successful, that's what Mr. Tinkerman is to be that gift for the community.
Well, you're not self-promotional and you're not very active on social media, but you can follow Guisepi on @Mr. Tinkerman.
Yep, all spilled out.
Maybe follow along the journey. Maybe you'll post more once you get that thing rolling.
Yeah.
All right, so we're trying a new segment now. It's called Explain That Gram. And if you're a Hot Ones watcher on YouTube, I stole it directly from that talk show. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to show you a couple of pictures from one of your Instagram accounts, and you're just going to kind of tell the larger story to it. So
That's fun.
Yeah. So thanks, Sean Evans and Hot Ones. So here you go.
Manitou Springs, Colorado, Halloween 2017. That's Ally and I dressed up. Ally is dressed up as a witch, obviously. I mean, it's barely a costume. And I'm dressed up as He Who Sips a Lot, who is a character of mine who comes from North Poland, not the North Pole. Okay. North Poland. A lot of people are confused. Sure. He's basically the character that Santa Claus was based off of. He was the fourth wise man that wasn't really talked about at Jesus' birth. But he drinks a lot of tea, and he's just kind of a funny character. He's got an accent, and he has a beard. The beard was made here on this farm 10, 12 years ago.
Was it?
Out of wool, probably from the farm here. It was like this big, but slowly over time, little bits fell off into my teacup, and it just kind of, and then it got all felted around here from drinking so much tea, and now it just looks like a dead rat on my face. Found it the other day. It got rained on. We were cleaning out the bus, and someone opened a paper bag and was like, "What is that?"
Hee-hoo!
Yeah, it's Hee-hoo.
I had the honor of being He Who Sips a Lot once.
Oh yeah.
Which was funny because I had a beard.
With the beard. Yeah, you put the beard over your beard.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
That was in Manitou Springs. I went to college in Colorado Springs, just down the road, and Ally and I were back there for. I gave a talk at my alma mater, and brought the tea bus there to the campus, and. It was right around Halloween, so we went up to Manitou Springs and dressed up and served tea, and there was just a ton of foot traffic, and it was a beautiful, wonderful evening right there.
You gave a talk at your college alma mater?
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah. What did the students think?
They were stoked.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a kind of alternative school.
Yeah.
Not super alternative, but they do things a little differently there, and. So it was great. I had so much fun. It's fun practicing my public speaking and engaging with people, and so what I do is very casual, or what I did with the free tea bus is very casual and not scripted, and not my only agenda was really to hang out with people.
Cool.
And so doing stuff like that was kind of fun. Make it a little bit more,
Sweet.
Official, scripted.
I love that. Well, let's do one more.
Oh, that's a good one. Also, Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
Front page of the Colorado Springs Gazette. That's me standing on a freight train. When I was 21, a local reporter caught wind that I was riding freight trains, and put me on the front page of the paper. I spent a bunch of my time in college riding freight trains, and for several years after I rode freight trains on and off for about 10 years. Took 10 years off, and then just last year took another train trip up from California back up here. Riding freight trains was a big part of my younger traveling years, and that was kind of early days. Mm-hmm. Made a documentary called Steel Don't Bend. I think it might be, but it's resurfaced on YouTube recently, about riding freight trains and just interviewing other train riders. And there's always just been something for me about the lure of the road and listening to hobo songs and being able to spend time in any strata of society.
Yeah.
And riding trains with people has been one of the most eye-opening experiences for me. Being cold and wet and tired and hungry and waiting in a train yard in 100 degrees for 2 days trying to get on a train, and living by the seat of your pants, just getting stranded in the mountains, knocking on doors, asking to work in exchange for food, putting yourself out there, giving up some of your, actually what I talked about in that specific article was giving up some of your security for freedom. It's that kind of that's part of the social contract that we sign away some of our freedom to live in society in order to get some security. And this is just kind of step in that other direction, experiencing, and you can get the same thing from backcountry hiking or living out of a school bus or whatever these things are. So yeah, love trains.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I'll try to find that documentary on YouTube and link to it in the show notes. So awesome. Well, a couple more questions before we wrap up. I'm going to read you a question from your now wife, Ally. It's a good one. If I can find it. Giuseppe, what is one of the biggest lessons of getting off of the road and into a more rooted lifestyle?
One of my biggest, this is a good one. One of the biggest lessons for me was, I think as much as I tried not to be, I was overly judgmental about other people and when I was on the road, in the sense that I'd never understood how much work it was for a lot of people to maintain a home, and the ruts that people get stuck in, and I would judge people for the stupidest things. They would have like 20 of the same salsa container that they're using to store things in, and I was like, how could anyone ever buy that much like single-use plastic at a time, or like repetitively enough to accumulate that many salsa containers? Here I am. I did the exact same thing. And when they showed it to me, they're like, look, I'm doing this, I'm reusing this. Isn't this so great? And I'm like, yeah, cool. But like, how come you have all this single-use plastic? And it's so funny because becoming stationary and dumpster diving less, although I have alternative means of acquiring free waste food. I realize so much more, and that's just one small example that my judgment was not condemning and not super outward, and mostly my internal conversation. But I realize how easy it is to get stuck in ruts, how routine can be good to some extent, and it's been good for me in many ways, but it also is really easy to slip into a rut when you're in routine. Things that I had no experience with for most of my adult life. And I realize, just how much work it is. And for me, trying to find that balance, how do I, because I have needed more money being off the road than being on the road. And that's like a big one for me, is like, well, I don't want to leave every day to go do something away from my home.
Right.
Like on the road, I was in my home every day.
Yeah.
I was like, I was roamsteading. I could rinse my sprouts anytime I wanted. I can make a meal anytime I wanted. And it's a completely different lifestyle. But Ally and I are figuring out ways to create the systems necessary for us to be able to have a very similar thing in a stationary form.
Well, thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that.
Yeah.
I think that's difficult to do, let alone when you're being recorded. So.
Yeah, well, sorry I judged some of you guys.
We all do, though. That's the dirty little secret, is we all do, and we all need to be better about that. So hopefully as we get older, we can be less judgmental and more loving of each other. So great answer. I guess the final question is, what is next for you? Are you going to ever take Mr. Tinkerman on the road, free T-bus style, or when do we get a dumpster dive in Wisconsin, that kind of thing?
That's a good question.
So yeah, what's next for Giusepi and Ally and the land, and anything you want to talk about there?
We are feeling out what it means to homestead. What does it mean to be on land, to be connected to that land, to have animals and grow food and, create that kind of thing. It's and we're just getting a taste of that right now. And so far, the taste is very pleasant.
You have a beautiful place here.
Yeah, oh my gosh, we are so lucky to have ended up on this land.
Totally.
And we're feeling it out. And if this is seeming to feel right, and if it continues to be, we signed a year agreement to be here. to help out on this land. That's end of that's coming up here in November, and I know we'll sign another year or two agreement. And for us, that looks like creating the systems that we need, building my shop, getting some of our solar stuff set up, proper fencing for our animals and garden, and rehabilitating soil, and getting things and creating some more housing here, getting things set up so that we can take off on journeys, so that we can. And Mr. Tinkerman, I always imagined was going to be something very similar to Edna, where it was a van that was a workshop on wheels and take it out on the road. And it's seeming like it might be something a little different now. It's a stationary shop for a local community that sometimes hits the road with, I've got a pickup truck with a utility bed on it, full of tools, and it might just be going on a road trip to visit
there you go.
buddies in Wisconsin to do a project, or to, like I said, we were in Montana for a month last summer, renovating our friend's bathroom, and with all salvage materials and making it amazing. And so Mr. Tinkerman, the mobile version, might not be as grandiose as the free T-bus, but idea is to have a home base here where we can leave for a month or two at a time, and other people are around to help take care of things. And it's more of a more stationary, less mobile, but with options.
Friday Harbor is lucky to have you, and I'm so happy that we were finally able to visit. I've always heard about this place from you, so I'm a little jealous of Friday Harbor, but I love you and Ally both so much, and thanks for having me at your wedding, man.
Love you too, man. Mason was a groomsman, by the way.
I was the hats bearer.
Oh yeah.
For the one you're wearing right now, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. So awesome. Well, thanks for joining me on the Herbalist Hour, Guisepi.
Thanks for having me, Mason.
Yeah, of course. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye. Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our HERBAL YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an HERBAL Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbal.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our HERBAL Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herbal.com/schoolhouse, enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.